Hello, founders. Welcome to Startups.com. We are live. We are here Tuesdays every day. In case you didn't know so far, we jump into pitch decks. Today is our pitch deck edition of the show. I have here the venerable Will Schroeder, CEO and founder of Startups.com. You know him as the pitch deck doctor. Will, how are you doing today?
I'm great. I'm looking forward to getting into some stuff today. We got a fun one today.
Yeah, we got a fun one. So wanted to set this up. Like I said, every single Tuesday, we work through pitch decks. And what we want to do is make sure that all of your questions are answered. So if you are in the audience right now, no matter where you're watching this, if you have a question, use the Q&A box or the chat and even put it in now. If you put it in now, we're okay with you hijacking the show. We're okay with you completely absconding the agenda and saying, I want to talk about me and my stuff and my startup. We're okay with that. We're going to answer questions. We have always lovely Jen here, and she's going to be watching the chat lines, going to be watching the Q&A, and going to be interrupting us. We want to prioritize that. With that being said, Will, we are going to just not waste any time whatsoever. And the benefit of this is for all of you founders out there who have the courage to send us your pitch deck. And I know sometimes I twist your rubber arms and I say, we want to work on your pitch deck. You are not going to get a time like this where me and Will on the same call, we're going to be working on one pitch deck. You are literally going to get like $3 million worth of consulting right there, right now on the spot. And then we're going to record it. We send it off to founders. If you are interested in having your pitch deck be featured and participate in this, please reach out to me, send it to advisor@startups.com. We got to do a little bit of release and a little bit of waiver and all those things. But we are going to jump right in. Will, you got anything for us before we start, or you just want to get right into it?
Yeah, I think a standard disclaimer. When folks send out their pitch deck, it's personal. It's personal.
Totally.
Right? I mean, it's showing your baby, right? And I want to just say every time, I respect the fact that founders do it. Also, we're not jerks about it. Like, our job here isn't to like tear your deck apart, which isn't to say we won't be honest. It's just to say our job is to help you, not to make you feel bad about your pitch deck. That brings me no pleasure. I'm sure that brings you no pleasure, Ed.
Yeah. Sometimes we do a little bit of a buddy cop, good cop, bad cop routine, but to your benefit, everyone.
Buddy cop movie with you.
Exactly. And Will and I were just working on our comedic timing together so that we can have our Netflix special. That's what we're going.
We've already got our matching V-necks. We're halfway there.
We're going. Yes. I saw a comment in there. Yes. All you have to do, we will have Jen just track the response. If you want to send in your pitch deck and you want the critique and everything like that, Jen will reach out to you. We'll take care of it. I know we've got this founder, and not too sure if this founder, you know who I'm talking about. If you want to stay anonymous, let us know. Your name's going to kind of pop up anyway. But feel free to interact with us. Everybody can jump right in. We are going to get right in here. And we have Will today, a sports training solution for the modern athlete, Racket Fit Pro. Will, right off, impressions about this cover page. We always like to start here.
It was just a couple of things. First off, just, before we kind of get into the impressions, one thing I want to say is that I like the fact that we look at lots of different decks, because a lot of times when you're getting feedback, it's like the same deck. It's yet another B2B SaaS company, or it's like the same tech company, et cetera. And I think as we get into different types of decks, go to consumer packaged goods, just all different types, you start to see that even though the industries are different, the feedback in the process, et cetera, is very much the same. So I think that's interesting. Beyond that, going back to the deck for a second, the visual matters, right? And in this case, again, I've got a guy playing what looks to be squash, right? That visual, while you may overlook it, is really important. It's exactly what people are going to key in on. And the advice I always give when you're putting visuals up there is just remember that your visual means something to you. When you look at that, you might look at that and say squash, or you might look at that and say athlete, etc. But a visual means 100 different things to 100 different people. Always be careful what you present, because what you get back in response is very inconsistent. Ed?
Never take anything for granted. Just always think and ask questions. And it's really great. And we want you to get this feedback from us, because I say this all the time. You'd rather bomb with friendly fire like me and Will versus put in front of investors. So we're actually creating artificial consequences, because you can bomb with us and it's not going to kill your startup fundraising chances. So you rather shoot that bullet here, get that feedback. That would be my feedback right there.
You bet. All right, let's do it.
The other thing is, right away, my impression of this, Will, we talk about this in the tagline. For me, sports training solutions for the modern athlete. For me, it's like, okay, it's good, but it could be a little better in terms of really getting into what this startup is, but it's not trying to be clever. It's at least clear. So I'm going to give it marks.
Okay. I'm giving it a 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10. Just simply, I like the imagery. I don't like faded imagery, but that's personal preference. And I think sports training solutions is way too broad.
Yeah.
I think it's nondescript. If it was on the mark, I think this would be a great place to start.
Great. And so we know, here's the preview because we got to look at this. I preview. We're working with Aiden. Aiden is one of the best founders that we've had so far. He is so active. Like, he is just a whirlwind that I actually have to slow him down and be like, you know what, maybe we need to just throttle it back a little bit. So, and Aiden is totally courageous, being ready and open to having us talk with him. So for me, I know this is all about preventing injuries. So we could put that into this type of pitch deck in terms of the tagline right on the cover. Okay, moving along. Problem. Here it is. Every year, over 73 million racket sport athletes in the United States risk spending up to $6.6 billion on treating largely preventable injuries due to inadequate, inaccessible, and prohibitively expensive injury prevention strategies.
Okay. First off, I can always tell my work, so to speak. I can tell when someone's using our formula. So Aiden, if you're not using our formula for how you put together a problem statement and you just happen to come out with exactly how we do it, thank you. If you are using the formula, also thank you. Just, for folks that are seeing this for the first time, we always open up, always, the first words, if you will, are the size of the market and who the market is. Okay. So 73 million racket sports athletes. Boom. Nailed it. That's all. I love the notes. That's all I need to know. Is so many people do things like they'll say 1 in 3 or 50% or things like that. That's a horrible way to open up your problem statement. If it's 1 in 3, tell me what the whole number is. 1 in 3 of what? If it's Americans and you say 1 in 3 Americans and it's like there's 300 million Americans, there's more, but whatever. Then just tell me it's 100 million Americans. More specifically, I want to know how much money is on the table. And you just told me it's 73 million people and 6.6 billion on the table. That's the perfect way to open up a problem statement. So structurally on the money, Ed.
Totally. And again, Aiden is so coachable. And so I know he's a big believer in what we're doing. And the fact that he was able to narrow this down and he highlighted, like, we know what's going through his mind. He's got it right on board because he's highlighted the right numbers. I'm curious what you think about this last half here, Will.
I'm a little bit anxious about it because it feels accurate, but a bit amorphous. These strategies are inadequate, inaccessible, and prohibitively expensive, but a prevention strategy could mean all kinds of stuff. So let's hone in on that for a second. When we're opening up the problem, we want to be as specific as possible. We want to be hyper specific as to what the problem is, what that pain point is. When we go broader and we use categorical definitions like injury prevention strategies, that could mean a whole host of things. It's a little bit dangerous because, again, the audience is interpreting that in a whole bunch of different ways.
Yeah, I agree. When you say anxious, that's actually a really interesting way that you describe this because it starts off so strong and then you potentially lose it. I'm going to take a page out of me learning to be a creative writer. It's kind of something that I've been mildly obsessed with. By the way, Will builds houses and he builds all his furniture. I do creative writing. And so for me, I've learned adverbs. So largely, prohibitively, you don't necessarily need that. And if you can cut things down. So this is where I'm just wondering, Will, what your thought is. If we just went straight on treating largely preventable injuries, well, if we just took all this out and we said treating preventable injuries, largely preventable injuries, to me, that slims it down. If you want to add some additional things like get some alliteration, the power of 3, keep it slim, but you don't want to bog down a statement that starts off really great and then weigh it down on the end. That's my thought.
But what he did do is, and I'm hoping this will reflect in the solution statement, he highlighted exactly what the problem pain points are.
True.
Inadequate, inaccessible, prohibitively expensive. Unfortunately, those concepts, again, are pretty broad. Let's go to the solution statement, and then let's see how it translates.
You bet. Our solution is a mobile app leveraging the knowledge base of Team USA experts that prevents injuries and provides fitness programming at 195x cheaper than expert-level personal training and physiotherapy.
No one will ever remember that. It's not a criticism. It's just if we had all the folks on the call right now, and this is the test I want all of you guys to use on your own deck right now, take that information and put this slide in front of anybody. It doesn't matter who it is. Have them read it, close their eyes, and read it back to you. If they can't even come close to what you wrote, you've just failed the most basic memory test of all time. And if your deck can't pass a basic memory test, it's not effective. The reason this is a little bit heady is because I think he wants to cover a lot of things in a short period of time.
Oh, yeah.
At the expense of all the things.
Yeah. Well, and that's what happens when you lay down in the solution or problem statement, inadequate, inaccessible, prohibitively expensive. Like we talk about, you have to address those things. So if you've got a lot of things in your problem, you're going to try and cram a lot of things into your solution. So what's happening?
Let's isolate that. So when we opened up the problem statement, let's go back for a second, Ed, if you will. What we just said in this problem statement is this parameters of what we're allowed to say in the next slide, the solution statement, have to address the concept of inadequate, of inaccessible, and prohibitively expensive. Now, the solution might do that, but let's jump back to the solution. Do we have something here that clearly maps to inadequate? And if you're not sure, that is the problem, right? This isn't an Aiden question. This is an us question because we are the audience. And all the folks, watching live that'll watch the recorded version later, think about this. You saw inadequate. Your audience saw inadequate. Did you see inadequate on this solution statement? Was it isolated in a way where you could say, shit, okay, that's 1 for 1. That's inadequate. That's adequate, right?
Yeah,
You want to be super deliberate.
You could make the argument that inadequate is covered by the fact that you're leveraging Team USA experts.
Yep.
But that's the problem is I have to make a stretch in my mind. It takes me cognitive energy and capacity to actually make that connection. It's not an immediate one.
There's also a lot of concepts being layered into a single sentence, which makes it hard to unpack and hard to remember. A couple things you could do here, because he's using the right structure. So dig the structure. It's our structure, right? What we'll want to do is we'll want to make sure that we basically highlight or focus on mapping inadequate to adequate, in mapping inexpensive or expensive to inexpensive, et cetera. Like we're saying 195x cheaper. But what I think we're saying, is that this somehow digs into that what was the number? 6 billion?
6.6 billion, yeah.
6.6 billion number that's being spent treating these injuries. You see what I'm saying? Like it's cheaper than what? We said it's 195x cheaper, but cheaper than what?
Yeah, he's saying cheaper than expert level personal training and physiotherapy. And this is where, let's just do this as an example. We're trying to kind of massage what Aiden has. But to give an example, if you said every year 73 million racket sports athletes risk spending 6.6 billion on treating largely preventable injuries because treatment's too expensive. And then you said the solution is that we have a mobile app that has experts on it, provides programming to prevent injuries that's 10x cheaper than physiotherapy. That would just be very straightforward.
In what I was trying to get to is 10x cheaper than what price point? Like if you're saying it's 195x cheaper than personal training and physiotherapy, but you didn't tell me how much money is being spent on that, like I have no context for that, then what 195x could mean to the market. I don't really know. I don't imagine that $6.6 billion is being spent specifically on expert level personal training and physiotherapy, but maybe it is. In which case, I need to know that mapping is what we're talking about.
That's right.
I can't say it's cheaper if I don't know it's cheaper than like out of what price point.
Now, Will, I'm going to interrupt because I want to keep the flow of our conversation. Yeah. We had a great question come in specifically on this, and I wouldn't interrupt this unless it was applicable. But let me read this. What if we're solving multiple problems? This is a common thing we get all the time, right?
Yep.
What if we're solving multiple problems for separate user markets with a single solution? For example, 3 markets, we're solving problems for clients, providers, managers, one solution, multi-app platform that addresses each of these problems for each market. What do you say to that, Will?
Okay, let's rant a little bit.
I like it.
For the good of all. Yeah. You only get to pick one. And I want to help you understand why. This has nothing to do with, what options you have as a founder. It's your damn company. Do whatever you want. When I say you only get to pick one, I mean, we have a very limited window of attention within that investor's purview at this very moment. I'm talking seconds. There's no version where any investor, any audience member is going to dissect all of those, make all the same connections you made, by the way, in most cases without you being present, and go, oh, this makes a ton of sense. And by the way, this comes up all the time, so this isn't unique. What we have to do is we have to open up with the most important problem, the one that we solve the best or that's the biggest. And then later in the deck, through our product roadmap, through how it works, we can start to expand on how that affects other people. We can even get that into the total addressable market. We can say, we're starting here, but this also affects others. When you try to do this multi-layered, we fix all these things process, you lose everybody every time. It never, ever. I've seen thousands and thousands of decks, every kind of deck you could possibly fathom. I've never seen someone pull this off. The way to do it, again, is to start with which part of that market are you best at? Not at the expense of the other ones. We can talk about the other ones later, but let's hook the audience. Let's reel the investor in with the one that's most important. Ed, what do you think?
Totally. Now, let me just add the next component to it. When it comes to an investor writing a check, whenever I see someone trying to solve multiple problems, multi-layered, I look at it like, okay, I'm going to give them a cup and we're going to give them access to some cash. And then they've got 3 buckets to fill. You got 3 markets, 3 users, 3 buckets. So you're going to go and take that little cup, go to the river, and you're going to scoop in 1 cup, and then you're going to put it in 1 bucket, then go back, second bucket, third bucket. How long is it going to take to establish those buckets? And so many things can happen. So I worry that my money's going to get diluted.
You bet.
If you come to me with a strong, this is where we're going to, here's our beachhead, and later on say we can expand once we've dominated that, then I have more confidence.
Correct. And again, all I do, the process I go through in this is I stack rank all of the problems and I just say, which one's at the top? Let me start there. Sometimes there are other, like the second order problem or the third order problem has to be incorporated into the problem statement in order for it to make sense. But typically I'm looking for what's the least I need to say in order to hook people into this. Remember, your problem statement doesn't need to be the all and final statement. Like whatever you didn't say there, you're not allowed to ever talk about, right? It's just a trailer. It's just a hook. It's just a way to get people kind of thinking about the process. And then once they dig what you're doing, then pull them in with the rest of it. Don't try to sell the whole thing in one sentence on one slide. It never works.
To make this very direct and exact, there's a lot of ways that you can use a go-to-market strategy and explain this is how we're going to then expand in other markets or a vision roadmap. There are other outlets that you should look into. Let's jump back in. Hopefully that answered your question. Feel free to follow up.
Yeah.
So we really want to boil this out. What would you say to Aiden here and say, this is your homework? Do it so that we can improve it for the next time.
I've got to imagine we'd want to assign that to inadequate or inaccessible, et cetera. In other words, I might say we have an easily accessible mobile app, right? Right off the gates, boom, accessible mobile app. Got it. Leveraging the knowledge base of Team USA experts in what was the other descriptor I was looking for? Previous slide. Inaccessible, inadequate. I'm assuming inadequate is going to map to the Team USA being badass.
Yep.
And so I would say comprehensive, specific, something like that clearly can map back to inadequate. And I don't think this is that far off.
Yeah, it's close.
But I don't think those 2 points are that strong. I don't think it being accessible, the whole internet's accessible. So like, it's kind of hard to like make that unique. I get it. If this is all locked behind somewhere, it's harder to get to. I do get that. But my gut tells me the money shot here is 195x cheaper. Like if I were to say the average person is going to spend $10,000 on therapy, I'm making this up, but we're going to give them better therapy for $600. That's what I would want to be nailing over the head. I can't say 195x cheaper because no one has a baseline for what it's cheaper than.
Yeah, well, wouldn't you say for this instance, same thing, talking about everybody, if you've got multiple benefits, you got multiple problems, stack rank, and then that's going to help you stack rank the benefits or the solution and how we're going to address that. Again, but Aiden, close. Probably the closest we've seen a deck come so far in the series that we've been doing.
Pretty solid. Listen, don't take the feedback as something's broken. Take the feedback as here's what I can refine. And I'm not mincing words. I'm saying if this thing were way off the mark, we'd start off by saying, hey, it's way off the mark. It's not way off the mark.
Yeah. Pretty good. All right. Market size. We've got starting with squash as our beachhead. So we're starting with the $302 million. The SOM, which is 24% app users, reading this. Then we got the SAM, and then we got the TAM. So we got this kind of inverted market size.
If I'm not mistaken, this is upside down.
It is.
Okay. I mean, not a huge deal, but okay. Ed, you and I are always going to have different versions on TAM, SAM, SOM. I don't believe in TAM, SAM, SOM. You believe in TAM, SAM, SOM. Both of us are right, if I'm being honest. What's your take when you think about how Aiden wants to extract this market or kind of look at it?
Well, this is a classic thing we always point about. Let's start with the TAM, right? Total addressable market. In squash, we expect to spend in a $13 billion global racket sport industry. That's not your market. That's all the money that's spent in racquetball, not on what your product does.
Correct. Let's expand on that because you're going to hear us. If you guys listen to us enough, you're going to hear us say this over and over.
Like broken records. That's what we're going to be.
Which is okay.
Yep.
Your total addressable market can only include stuff you sell. And if you want kind of like an easy way to just double check your work, all you have to say is, if everybody only bought from me for this product, what's the total amount of money I would generate in a year? That's your total addressable market. Think about it. Your market can't be bigger than if everybody only bought from you. Apple's market for the iPhone can't be bigger than if people only bought iPhones or, tablet phones or whatever you want to call mobile phones from Apple.
And that's what's called a bottom-up analysis.
You bet. And so in this case, we're also mincing some terms because we're talking about the racket industry, right? Which includes lots of different sports, but we're also talking about physical recovery and therapy, et cetera, which has really nothing to do with, I think, the sport industry, but I don't know that. And the fact that I don't know that is the problem, right? It's not a me issue. It's your job to make me smart, to say, hey, this is the market. We're dealing with recovery, therapy, what have you. And here's exactly how much people are spending.
Now, Aiden is on the right track here. for a Tam Sam if he started with, there are, let's say, 100 million racket sport players, and if they all used our stuff, this is how much money we'd make. Now, if you said SAM, serviceable addressable market, which is typically the segment that best suits your business model or your strategy, and you said, we're going to start with squash players, which is 20 million. So you went from 100 million to 20 million. I'm making up these numbers because I have no idea. And this is how much money we made. Now we're on the right track. And then for everybody, the theory is serviceable, obtainable market is what you could realistically make. And the reason that I like it is I never believe what people come up with anyway, right? Especially when it comes to SOM. But the reason I made my founders do it before we invested in them or consider them for investment is because I wanted to see founders actually able to do that calculation. That was important for me to see. And that was just part of our investment thesis, that we wanted founders to be able to do that. It's not necessary, as Will points out all the time, it's not necessarily to have a SOM.
Well, yeah. So if we go back to that simpler version that I use, just because I think it's easier to communicate, is just basically what's your beachhead market, which is that 302 million, and what's the TAM. And the way I pitch it, when I was out raising money for my companies or I help people raise money, is this simple. This is where we're going to get started to see if this thing even has product market fit, right? It's a small enough market that we can do some damage, but we can also isolate it. We're raising a small amount of money relative to what we'll raise in the future. So this is where we're going to establish our beachhead, which he called out. If it works, this thing could be big. If it works, there's 13 billion on the table for us to expand to. The example we use through a bunch of our courses is like Uber back in the day. And what we say is like the beachhead market, let's say it was Seattle, and Seattle's a $250 million taxi industry. If it works in Seattle, it kind of works the same everywhere else.
Oh yeah.
So the total TAM for taxi industry, this is back in the day, is like $60 billion. And so all I want to communicate here is, look, here's where we're starting, here's where we're ending. If we don't get this first part right, sort of who cares about the rest of it? So let's focus on that.
Yeah, and let me support what Will said. I have literally seen investors be okay with both versions, as long as it communicates a story and makes sense. And that's the reason there's so many tools that we recommend you check out and find the tool that works best for you.
All right, let's keep going.
Okay, I got a question for you, Will. What do you think about why now slides?
To me, why now seems odd. I do remember kind of an era where why now slides were more popular. And sometimes there's a moment or a trend, blockchain, AI, etc., where there's something unique that's happening in the market that is like a groundswell. Now, that said, unless there is a really unique thing happening, like a once in a lifetime opportunity, I feel like why now is more or less implied in the market opportunity to begin with. If we're saying there's $6.6 billion on the table, who cares if it's now or later? The point is there's $6.6 billion that nobody's taking.
I advise founders to use why now slides only in two instances. One, if there is a major, just like you said, Will, a major inflection point in the market somehow, and it's clear, it's definitive, it's totally like getting everybody's attention. That's the first thing. And the other reason is to say why it would work now where it didn't work in the past. And that
100%,
goes back to inflection in the marketplace. Yeah.
Is a quick side story. I used to have a why now slide when I was pitching internet services. And I hope nobody's old enough on this show right now to even know what that means. But like in 1994, I had a why now slide in my pitch decks to explain what the internet was. I mean, it's funny to say now, but like when I dropped out of college and I told my college counselor that I was dropping out, her response to start an internet company, her response was, "What's the internet?" So there is a time when nobody knew the internet existed or what it was. So a why now would have been critical. But 10 years later, why now would have made no sense, right? So like, I think why now is a very unique case where something special is happening that you really want to emphasize. Otherwise, everything's a current opportunity.
And here's where it's like, okay, we could make the argument, but I don't think it's strong enough. Maybe, Will, you think something different, that there is an inflection point for squash going into 2028 Olympics, but there's not enough data. There's not enough teeth into it unless you got a crystal ball or you're saying because of this, it's going to explode in popularity. I really waffle. This slide for me, I think it's a little redundant, like you talked about.
Well, I think so too, and redundancy is definitely an enemy here. We've got a couple things that I'm concerned about. I don't want to pick on this slide too much, but I want to talk about it because it's an awesome opportunity that Aiden gave us to be able to talk about this stuff, whether you use it or not. First off, we said racket sport industry, 9 billion. We just introduced a new figure. I've got three figures so far that I've seen. I've seen 6.6 billion, I've seen 9 billion, 13 billion.
Yeah.
You only get one. It's either a $6.6 billion industry, a $13 billion industry, or a $9 billion industry. You get to pick one TAM and you reference it everywhere. There's no variations whatsoever. Here, we're jumping into different industries, which essentially have different characteristics that make them the industry, but you have to be laser focused on one specific TAM. You're like, look, we are specifically focused on the recovery industry in racket sports, which is 6.6 billion. That's our thing. And you never mention any other number that's otherwise.
Mm-hmm. And then for me, fastest growing sports, yeah, I appreciate it, but it's difficult for me to correlate the performance of the squash and preventable injuries and everything like that to pickleball. And I don't know. I think we're just kind of stretching. We're throwing a lot of stuff in there to introduce concepts to pad the argument.
What I'm not sure is why it matters. I play racquetball, I play pickleball, I play tennis, right? I feel like I can get injured all the same in all three of them. Like I there's been no case made to me here. And this is a case where probably Chance knows way, or I'm sorry, Chance, Aiden, I was looking at Chance. Aiden knows way more about the intricacies of those different sports than I do. But this happens all the time in pitch decks. The founder has intimate knowledge about the product, the industry, et cetera, and jumps into assumptions like, of course, we're starting with squash, or this is pickleball, et cetera, and forgetting that at the most basic level, the audience still has no idea what injuries we're talking about.
Yeah.
Or why they're getting injured, or why they're preventable. We haven't established the case whatsoever that we've prevented anything, or why these injuries were happening to begin with.
Yes.
But here's the thing. Aiden knows this, and he's probably an expert at this. He forgot to tell anybody. And it happens all the time.
Yes, absolutely. All right. So here's a good one. Let me just talk. Well, let's answer this FAQ for a second, Will. But one of the most powerful why now slides that I saw was for cybersecurity. And this was ages ago, like in cybersecurity, like 2 years ago is ages ago, right? But this was probably like 3 or 4 years ago. And the why now slide was China just spent like $2 trillion on a quantum computer hacking device. Like that was fresh news. Why now? Investors loved it. And
that I love.
Company got funded.
You bet. If it's something like, hey, COVID just happened, we're here to solve COVID, why now makes a ton of sense, right? It's got to be substantive. That's
the principle for everybody else watching this takeaway. The question is it a bad idea to display more than one chart within the deck that supports market growth positive trends?
Yep. And it's not because the charts are bad. I don't think folks appreciate the amount of RAM that we're taking up in an investor's mind, right? Or the cognitive ability.
Yeah.
Here's how we think a deck is going to get digested. That an investor will go slide by slide, kind of like we're doing right now, and like unpack every single slide. Ed, you've gone through this process countless times as an investor. How much time did you invest per deck?
3 minutes tops after I made a decision whether I was going to invest 3 minutes in the first 90 seconds.
So going to the question, now imagine in that 3 minutes, your mind has to absorb and qualify multiple charts with multiple graphs. We tend to think that these decks are consumed like a term paper, whereby there's a professor on the other end, just like, grinding through all of the stuff we put together. It's like, here's what you have to put in your mind. This is exactly the image I want you to have in your mind of how your deck's going to be consumed. You had to email to the investor. The investor got it while they're in security at the airport, flipping through it. And this is probably how it's going to happen.
That's what I did.
Yep. Flipping through it with their thumb, okay, on a tiny screen. So think about that, right? On a tiny screen, while their kids are pulling at their coattail, distracting them with something else. You have no focus, no attention. It's not Shark Tank where they're filming an entire episode and the whole crew is just focused on your idea. It's like I have to get through one of 60 of these and I have no attention to spend on it. So all I'm saying is as you're loading your slides up with more stuff, citations that no one's going to use, charts that no one's going to digest, etc., you're preventing your audience from understanding what it is that you actually do.
Yeah, and I don't care about trends. I don't care that it's projected to be, by this point in time. I'm not even there yet. Sure, I will do that analysis later on, but right now I care about the magnitude of the problem, the size of the problem. So just tell me there are like 30 million people, right? That's it. And this is how much money we can make. It's so simple to get my attention that way.
Yep. All I want to hear is there's a ton of money being spent or lost on this problem, and we've got the solution for it. That's all I want to be able to take away. Everything else is filler.
Okay, now this is the next slide that we got, how it works. So players get the secret sauce of Team USA training and injury prevention plans through their smartphone. Users enter data, AI motion capture, individualized done-for-you program. And then at the bottom, users receive completely customized training, all from the comfort of their smartphone.
Again, I can recognize our work, so I see the pattern here. So I'll comment that, yes, the structure of it is great. A couple of things. I always look at how it works as being a three-step process. I just tend to find that works really well all the time. And a couple of things that Aiden did here that folks watching this may not be aware of. The first thing that he did well is he gave me a single summary sentence at the top that kind of said, look, if you don't even read all this other stuff, or I kind of screwed it up, which happens all the time, this is all I need you to know. I would even recommend maybe changing the color of that to red or something that's like, this is the TLDR. Like, I just need you to know this, that they're basically getting all of the therapy done with their smartphone. I might also say players save money if I'm trying to push that theme, right? Players
Mm.
recover faster if I'm trying to push that theme. Like,
Yep.
I might want to talk a little bit more about outcome. The AI motion capture is very cool. User performs series of assessments to determine strengths and weaknesses, but I would have no idea how that worked, right? AI motion capture, is it on my camera? Am I looking at my knee while I'm doing something? That's cool. If so, I probably want to have an image of that being done in that second, an image of a smartphone pointing at someone's leg with some sort of results on the phone. That's a powerful visual. For the first step, user enters data. That's fine. I usually try to say, look, don't put anything here that's obvious. And I'm not picking on Aiden on this one. What I'm saying is, like, a lot of times people will say customer goes to website, customer creates account, customer logs in, customer goes to that. Like, just assume they do that. That's how all apps work. Get to the part where they do something meaningful with your app.
I know Aiden's example. I've talked to him. We had an advisory meeting before, and it was so cool how he described to me. He's like, okay, what you can do is just take a video of you doing these things. We're going to tell you what movements to make. We're going to run it through our AI, and then there's going to be like a printout, readout, and all those things. And then poof, based on that, you get, and he was telling me, based on the movement, I can tell what training program. I'm like, you can really do that?
That is awesome.
Right? That's totally cool. And I'm like, now put that, that's the magic sauce. Put that in your pitch deck and how it works and explain. And then I said, show a picture of the little lines going across with an actual racquetball player. That would be amazing.
That is amazing. Now, look, I always say go to visuals last. Right? Draft your pitch deck in Windows 3.11 notepad.exe, right? I'm saying, like, get it as basic as possible. No fonts, no nothing but carriage returns, right? And I say that because I think no one ever wins in building a pitch deck because it was designed so well. They win in building a pitch deck because the copy is so good. However, now that the copy is pretty good on this one, now we bring in the visuals and we blow some minds, right? We show how this thing actually works with a couple of visuals. And again, the visuals can just be a screenshot or a photo of capturing the motion. I think that's really powerful. And I look at these icons, et cetera, as essentially wireframes to what will be a more substantive version later.
Yeah. And, you don't have to be redundant. We've got this whole thing, the whole smartphone thing, repeated and all this stuff. Just be economical. That's all I would say. But
in this case, we probably just don't need the bottom one.
Yeah. Like we're pretty good. We're pretty close here, but focus on the magic, the special sauce, those magic moments. You'll go so much further if you focus on that. All right. Business model. Our product will bridge the gap between expensive and accessible experts and cheap generalized fitness apps. Revenue model, free trial, 14-day access, 2-tiered pricing, basic, pro. And then we've got some financial projections here. So we're throwing a bunch of stuff on this slide.
The business model doesn't include financial projections, just so you guys know. The business model just said this is how we make money. It doesn't describe how much we make. Unless for some reason over time, there are like other types of revenue channels that are unlocked, in which case we kind of need a bit of a time or a chronology in order to understand when that happens. For example, if we're Uber back in the day, we might say, well, right now it's just black cars, but then that's going to turn into taxis, and then it's going to turn into people using their own cars, and kind of show an evolution where the timeline in the revenue model and business model will change, but the projections go on the financials model.
Yes, and you don't have to do this here and make a pitch. The business, you've already done that through the rest of your slide. This slide could have easily been said, we give a 14-day free trial and then upsell to a 2-tiered subscription model, and then a basic, $19 a month, pro, $80 a month, something like that. And that's really as far as you need to go.
We definitely would want to put the price points when we're saying basic and pro.
Yeah.
And if what we wanted to convey is that here's what it would cost between, inaccessible experts and generalized fitness apps. What we might say is we're charging, whatever our price point is for basic, which is 10% of what folks will pay for experts, and roughly on par with what they'll pay for, or a small premium over what they'd pay otherwise for a fitness app.
Yeah, well, you'd put that right in the top headline because that's a compelling thing that customers want to know, right?
You bet. In this, I'm sure this is going to dovetail somewhat in the competition slide as well, or it should. But this is a good opportunity to say, here's our pricing, and here's roughly where that pricing fits meaningfully.
Let me just pause for a moment and say a lot of founders don't want to put their pricing into their business model. And I've seen stats recently that investors are spending more time on business model slides than they have in years past. Why? Because there's been a lot of promises that haven't come true. And if you can't put in your pricing, it means you're either, and I'm not saying this is anybody here, you're either lazy or you have not battle tested your pricing. If you can do the research and battle test pricing, and you can tell the investor, we've talked to like 100 companies or 500 customers, and they agree that this is a good price, man, will that ever add extra oomph to your pitch deck.
By the way, it's also okay to be wrong on these prices, right? When the investor comes to you and says, hey, you said it was $19 a month. How do you know that's the price? That's the price we're testing right now. in our financial model, that's the price we've gone with. And we're raising money and we'll continue to raise money to test and refine and ideally optimize what that price is. And I say this as a tip, and Ed, some of your thoughts are here is whenever someone says, how do you know this is the answer? Right? Especially around things like assumptions, like your cost of acquisition or your pricing, you say, this is where we're starting. This is our target.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily what we know. We're not psychic, right? Like, how do you know exactly what people will pay? We don't, neither do you. We have a target that we're shooting for, that we're testing toward. That's always your answer.
But what I always do is I back it up with how I got there, how I decided.
Yeah,
so
that's the model. Yep.
You're allowed to say, listen, we're starting by undercutting the market by 20%.
Yep.
That's just how we're starting, and that's how we're going to test it. That's a totally reasonable explanation an investor will believe, the right investor.
You bet.
Next, competition. Athletes require accessible, affordable training that is high quality in order to reduce injuries and performance in their sport. Now, kudos. You got a headline up at the top. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then right across the top, we got Racket Fit Pro. We got all of them. And then we got convenience, cost, high quality.
Okay. Couple of things. And again, I can recognize our work. We've got 4 different competitors. Generally, I don't need to see more than 3. There's no magic rule here whatsoever, right? If the 4th competitor is very meaningful and they need to be here, great. It's rare that having so many competitors is the only way to tell this story. From a customer standpoint, they're typically picking from the top 3 anyway, right? So the fact that there's 30 more doesn't really tell the story differently. And I would even argue if among those competitors, there's really not much difference to them, you can kind of group them a bit and say we have competitors of this type, including these folks, and competitors of these type, Group A and Group B. And here's a couple names. What I see a lot of, and Ed, you tell me what you tend to see. I tend to see what looks like a giant inventory of every competitor that's ever existed, stamped on top of a quadrant, which says, we're awesome because we're in the top right and everybody else sucks. But it's like 50 logos. And I'm like, who in the world could possibly dissect that and understand what any of that means? So it's ineffective.
Yeah, and I love the fact that we can see pitch decks using the different, like this one's using the features and benefits matrix, right? And I can appreciate that. I'm going to tell you right now, usually I see founders, when they do this, they don't put enough competitors. They've got like 2, right? And then I see the big logo dump in the quadrant. So you want to avoid those extremes. But I'm going to point out something. Immediately, my eye went to this. Here, it says for CrossFit Mobile, right? And if yours is for racket sports, then why is this even incorporated there? Why is it even included? Unless you had down here, and Will talks about this all the time. This is what I've learned from Will. Only put the stuff in here that really, customers are going to care about, right? And you can use this to really identify. So for example, in one way, and I'm just spitballing here, you could have one of these say specifically for racket sports. And then you could put the competitors and say, this is an X. It's not for racket sports.
Yeah, right.
And show that they're trying, but it's not going to be focused. It might solve the problem, but it's not the same thing. So playing around with how many across the top, but this is so important. If you could pick the right dimensions here, it makes such a difference.
Watch what we do when we combine these. Here's how I would do it. I would have Racket Fit, trainers, coaches, and app. Within apps, I would mention here's 3 examples, because what you just said for all 3 of those is the same. They're all not racket, they're all expensive, and they're all not specific to our quality. You could have said the same thing essentially with a lot less words and just had a few more logos. Also, this is just a small quip, just for what it's worth, always highlight your category.
Yeah, so that's totally true.
Should be in yellow or whatever your highlight color is going to be.
Yeah, that's the reason people use green check marks and red check marks and all this visual language. Now, here's the thing is, listen, I really think, Will, a lot of people only give lip service to competition. Investors nail founders all the time for not understanding, recognizing competition. A lot of times founders bash competition. I've seen great founders say, you know what, Zoom is a great company and here's what we're learning from them, right? As our competitor type thing. So, it takes time. This, you develop it and you'll learn how to refine this slide as you put more work into it.
Let me build on that a little bit.
Yeah.
What we want to focus on isn't so much what our competitors are doing differently. That is not the focus of the competition slide, which is a total misnomer, because you look at it and go, wait, isn't that exactly what a competition slide is? The focus of the competition slide, if you really think about it, and this is what Hiten did do, is to say, here's what customers want.
Exactly.
Okay, that's the most important part. Here's what customers want. Here's where they go to get it. And here's why they don't get it there. They only get it with us, right?
Yeah.
So that's the focus of this, because what we're saying is, if this is what customers want and they can't get it across the street, that's why we're awesome. If the customers want something else and they can get it across the street, what's the value in this slide, right? We got to focus on where we found the chink in the armor.
And that, Will, you just did that. You answered the question that we have in the Q&A. How do you determine the best needs or metrics to compare? And TLDR, summarizing, base it on what the customer wants. And let me expand on that. You may say, oh, you know what? Our competitors use purple logos, okay? And our logo is green. Check, XX check, right? But who cares? Customers don't care. And it's a totally facetious example. But if your customers actually say, we only want to do business with companies that have green logos, that's important to us, then you put it in there, right? So it's just a straightforward way. Well, what are some other ways? Like, kind of expand and let's riff on this. Totally. What do you pick?
Yeah, so similar to when we talked about the problem, because the problem statement, what we said was the problem in the very first slide. The 3 problems that we talked about need to appear on damn near every slide in this deck. So what we said is this is where the problem is, right? It's inaccessible, it's unaffordable, et cetera. So every aspect of what we do, from our revenue model to our competition, et cetera, is doubling and tripling down on the fact that that is the problem. So if we get into our competition slide and we start talking about a whole bunch of other problems that are getting addressed, or needs that are getting addressed, we're totally missing the plot that we've been building all along, which is this is all about it being inaccessible, expensive, et cetera. So when we get to the competition slide, what we want to say is, yes, there's a bunch of things that we do better, but these are the most important things we do better, which is why we chose them on the problem slide.
Everybody should know, when you get into due diligence, savvy investors will actually expect a folder in your data room on research of your competition. They actually want you to go beyond that. This is you demonstrating you can simplify, communicate in a way that you're thoughtful about it, and it's totally clear night and day, so they can quickly make a decision, say, I like these founders, let's get them in the next stage of this process.
You bet. All right, let's keep going.
All right. Team slide. We have proven experience in Team USA athletics, full stack app creation, AI programming. I appreciate that. I like the logos. We got all the founders here, but I'm just going to accelerate our time, and Will, you can add comments. Not enough in terms of how these are things that I'm looking at, right? I'm looking at, have you worked on the problem before? What's your domain expertise? And what tells us that the team is really set apart? Now, we're getting there. Like, a lot of that is there in terms of we have the ability to build the product. We have domain expertise. I like the social proof of the logos. For me, I think we can push this slide just a little more, but for me, it's like one of these 7 or 8 out of 10s. We can go further.
A couple things off the bat. I've got a bunch of logos I don't recognize, so they don't exist. They're meaningless. The only logos I recognize are Amazon and US Squash. Now, a recognizable logo is worth its weight in gold. If you've got any connection to it, and let me just riff on this for a second. There's different ways to be able to attach that logo to your name, okay? Either you work there, that's the obvious one, right? They could be a client. If they were a client of yours, it could also be on there, right? So there's different ways to get there. But attaching the social proof of a big logo to what you do is so important.
Massive.
It's the fastest way that someone can say, oh, they did that, Amazon, okay, I'm going to move on. As Ed said, later on, they'll do a deep dive to figure out what you did there, et cetera. But right now, it's high-level pass. What I do need, can we go back to the slide, Ed?
Sure.
What I do need is I need something that tells me why each of the people are badass.
Yeah.
So I got Alex and I got Karen over there. They're on the team, but I don't really know why they're badass. They're just on the team. The team slide is not a company directory. The team slide is not an inventory of who works there. Same thing, right? The team slide is to say, who are the most important contributors that specifically are going to make this thing happen? At some other point in a different conversation, we'll talk about all the people that work there. This isn't that. This is, here's the least I want you to know, that the people that are running this thing, the only participating, but the people that are most influential are badass. And here's specifically why. If our technical advisor and Forex founder had 4 startups or logos I've never heard of, then the value isn't there. I've got to communicate what's the value of all the companies that he's built. In other words, if we're saying he's built 4 companies that have scaled to over $100 million, cool. Let's drop that right there. If Dr. Aiden's got 28 years as the highest level of trainer, et cetera, would want to know that.
That's what I wanted to see. How long? What's the tenure? If it's impressive, right? And
just give me a soundbite.
Aiden is impressive, and it's super important. One final thing is delineate, just a quick pro tip, delineate between full-time co-founders, advisors, not. I see a lot of founders smash everybody together, and it makes it look like you got this massive team of 15 full-time people working on there. And that is the question here. Should you include non-founding team members if you're a solo founder, they have less than 5% equity? Will?
Yeah, you can. Here's what if it's just you, I like to have at least 3 people on this slide. You can have 2. It's not going to make or break your slide. But when you get to 4, 5, 6, the other, like the 4th, 5th, 6th person better be so consequential in their resume or what they're contributing that it made sense to eat up all of this additional space, because they're directly taking away from the other people on this page.
Let me give you an expression. If it moves the needle, in a meaningful way, and you're not being hyperbolic, you're not trying to pull the wool, yes, absolutely. Like if you've been able to get, let me give an example. One founder, we were doing their pitch deck, we were doing their fundraising, we we're helping them, and they had Deepak Chopra as an advisor, right? This is huge author, etc. And I moved him up to the top.
Yeah, he's the most important person.
Yeah, exactly.
The founders, right?
Yeah. And I moved him to the top, and literally I had an investor say, and they told me, I got feedback from the investor. I just wanted to meet them because how did you get Deepak Chopra on the board, right? So that if it moves the needle, include and play around with it, get feedback. That's where we're going to send. Okay, well, we've hit our time limit. And as usual, we could probably go another 6 hours on but kudos. And I think this is very valuable. Will, what's your final word based on a summary, anything for Aiden based on what we've seen?
I'm going to give Aiden a B plus A minus, which is an insanely high grade. Said differently, I don't give out A pluses. So
rare, very rare.
Right. B plus A minus means I would be comfortable sitting next to you right now in pitching an investor. That doesn't mean that we couldn't make something better. There's always things we can tweak, etc. It means that we're not that far off, right? And part of the reason I say, wait, B plus deck, well, don't you want it to be like an A plus before you talk to an investor? No, I want it to be good enough that we get it in front of some investors, we get some feedback, and make 900 more revisions, right? There's no version where you get a perfect deck and you put it in front of investors and it just works perfectly, right? It's impossible. You got to get it out there. It's like writing a song, but you've never let anybody listen to it and wondering if it's going to be a hit. You kind of need to see if it's a good song or not before you figure out how you're going to invest more time into it. So my B plus grade is actually extremely high. I want to point that out.
Let me give my closing thought because I know Aiden, he's in pre-product, pre-revenue, pre-seed. And at that moment in time is when an investor invests in the person to be able to figure it out. And Aiden has proven through his pitch deck and the way he's occurred in all our meetings as a founder that I would say that kid will figure it out. Like if you're willing to do a pre-seed investment, that kid will figure it out based on what I've heard. I'd have no problems giving that endorsement.
Yep, I agree. Great job. And also, we say this every time. Thanks for sharing. You just helped a ton of people out by sharing your deck, making it available. It's hard to do. Again, it's hard to show everybody your baby and say, don't say my baby's ugly. But you did a great job. And it's really, really appreciated.
That is it for us, everyone. Thanks, Will, as always. My also thanks to Aiden. We are here every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern. Every Tuesday, these pitch decks happen. I look at the audience and it's growing every single time, which is fantastic. The contributions have been great. Participation has been great. As always, appreciate it. If you're watching this on the YouTubes, do the YouTube thing, like, comment, subscribe. Check us out at Startups.com. We appreciate all our community members and everybody who's attended. Will, once again, thanks so much. I'm going to see you next Tuesday.
Ed, you did a great job, man. Take care, everybody.